All right. Hello, everyone. This is Bobby Byrne. I'm a solutions architect for Dundas BI. Welcome to the Dundas BI Flexibility webinar. So we're just waiting for a couple more people to trickle in, and we'll get started in about 1 or 2 minutes. We got lots to cover, so I'll try and speed along. We're also doing this live, so come along with me on this, magical, magical Dundas BI journey where anything can happen. For the attendees that are already here, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the questions panel. There's actually a section dedicated to questions. Don't confuse it with the chat panel. I'll try and keep an eye on it, and we also have another staff member who's going to be keeping an eye on the questions in chat. But primarily submit your questions into the question panel. That way we can either answer them in real time, or we can answer them at a later time. Okay, well, it's probably a good time to start. I've got my coffee and I'm wearing my Darth Vader slippers, so I'm ready. Hopefully everyone else is ready. Now, just to give you an idea about what this webinar is for, quite a few of our competitors talk about flexibility and how their product is flexible, but saying one thing and showing it is something completely different. So I'm here to show you some of the cool things that we can do, and hopefully this will open up your mind to possibilities and ways in which you can enrich your users' experience on dashboards and reports and that sort of thing. So let's just dive right in. First on the docket, the agenda, we're going to be talking about interactions and data explorations. We're going to be talking about configurations and properties, the data preparation layer, and if we have time, I haven't really, I'm not sure how this is going to scale as far as presentation time goes, but I did have quite a few kind of scripting examples utilizing the API, and then we'll kind of leave some time at the end for questions. Okay, so let's start with interactions and data exploration. So what I've done is I've actually switched into Dundas BI, and I've just set up some slides with some simple buttons just so that you know kind of we are now in the environment. You can see the kind of panel open up here. So I mean, even if you wanted to do something like create a presentation and embed your visualizations into your presentation, you can do that within Dundas BI. It's just showcasing a little bit of the flexibility right there. But one of the first examples that not a lot of people know about is the ability to expand hierarchical data. You can drill down on hierarchical data, but this is actually something a little bit different. So the really important thing to get out of this is you can actually right-click, and there's this option to expand, and this allows you to see all of the data points under that hierarchical member without hiding the other members here. And then obviously works both ways, so you can expand and collapse this way as well. In this particular case, I've actually added a little bit of a script here because tables show it a little bit differently. I've actually attached a script to the data changed event of this table to synchronize these two charts. So if I expand out 2009, it expands out 2009 inside of the pie chart as well. Just something fun. It obviously works on multiple levels. Now the actual script to do that is, let's just edit this. Check this out. So for those of you who aren't aware of the different events that you can hook into, in the properties of the visualization itself, or any component for that matter, it could be a data visualization, or it could be a component, a non-data driven item. But in the actual visualization itself, there's a section in the main tab of properties, all the way down at the bottom. These are all the different events that can get triggered during the user's interaction with the dashboard or with the individual control. So here on the data changed control, I've added a script, and you can use the plus button to add another script, or you can add a pre-built interaction, such as showing the pop-up, navigating, changing a layer within the designer, filtering some data, drilling down on data that's already inside the visualization, even toggling template cells if you're utilizing template cells. That's what the kind of borders here are. It's a way in which you can kind of organize data. But in this case, I created a script, and here we're actually showing you just the script necessary. It's very simple. Basically, I'm syncing the expanded sets within the data result to the table itself, and then I'm just reloading the data. That's it. And if you want any of these samples, you can always contact support or submit a question inside of this webinar, and we can definitely send you the necessary material to get you started, or at least point you in the right direction. All right, let's move on. So zooming is incredibly important, and for performance reasons and for simplicity and for consuming data, we've set a number of default kind of zoom properties for you. So here we have a chart, and there's more data points than what the default zoom level allows for. And you can scroll across. Now you can modify that if you want, but I'm just going to, before I jump into actually editing this to show you what you can change, I'm going to show you a couple other examples, ways in which you can zoom differently within visualizations. So on a map, you can actually enable a dedicated control for zooming. So I've actually disabled the scroll to zoom, but the panning is still there. And if I wanted to, I could utilize the built-in control. That allows me to then pan around and get more kind of a clearer view. And another example, this is two different charts. Actually, it's the same chart, but set at different levels of granularity. So here we're seeing it at the quarter level. Here we're seeing it at the day level. I've actually set up this chart, this above chart, to act as the kind of zooming mechanism for the below chart. So what here I've enabled the selector to stay persistent, and if I drag this over, you can see that I'm now capable of zooming in on particular data points here, and I can obviously shrink this down if I don't need to view that much, or I can expand it out if I wanted to see more kind of data points. But let's actually jump into the properties themselves just to show you where to look. So let's check this out. So most of the properties that you're going to look for are right in the main section under this section called horizontal and vertical zooming. So here we've actually, if we wanted to modify the default vertical zoom, horizontal zoom for this chart to allow for more data points by default, we would go to horizontal zooming, and here set it up to be something other than the default value. I believe the default value is actually 15, but in this case you could set it to something like 50 in there. Since there's less than 50 data points, it's basically zooming out for you automatically. Now, if you wanted to do something like the linking, so here we're actually linking these two charts. Let's jump back to the properties. What I've done is I've actually utilized the selection cursor options. So here I'm saying only select horizontally. That's why it's kind of covering from top to bottom. The select action is actually set to none. Normally the default would be selecting the actual data points, but I'm actually setting it to none because it's acting as a zooming mechanism. And then you can also change the appearance of the selection as well. So if you wanted to change the color or the stroke, etc., you can do that. Here I'm just saying zoom in on chart 2. And that's it. Okay. Now we're going to cover another different type of interaction with the visualization. This is specific to hierarchical data. So here I've got my trusty AdventureWorks sample data, and I've got a hierarchy where bikes is expandable to different types of bikes. So that's great. But what I actually want to do is I want to set it up so instead of right-clicking and drilling down into that particular data point, I just want to just click on the data point and it automatically drills down. This is really handy for things like mobile experience, because in a mobile experience you would press and hold to expose the context menu, but maybe you just want to simplify the experience and make it a single interaction. So let's jump into edit mode. So I'm going to select the chart, go to properties. Again, just down at the bottom, there's all these events that you can hook into. We're going to want to hook into the click event. So whenever somebody clicks on the chart. And we're going to add a drill down interaction. So there it is. Now what that did is it just created the interaction. Let's open it up to see what it's actually doing. So it's got a few bound visuals. You can modify where it's actually going to show the drill down interaction. I want it to happen on this visualization. And the parameters themselves get automatically generated for you. So what it's saying is, the value that I click on, the level itself, drill down into the next level, and and filter the actual selection. So what does that look like? So let's switch back to view mode. And when I click on bikes, I didn't have to expose the context menu. It just worked. If I click on road bikes, again, it's going to zoom out so you can see the entire selection, and that's it. You can continue to interact with the data as normal, but if you wanted to simplify the experience, that is one way that you can do it. All right, next up, we're going to be talking about auto-detecting hierarchies. Now, this is less obvious, something that a power user really benefits from. I actually kind of have to go through the steps to show you exactly what I'm talking about, so let's dive right in. Essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be grabbing data directly from a data connector. So here I've got my trusty AdventureWorks data. I'm going to open up sales order detail table, which has a number of columns, including product ID. So let's drag that on there. And let's just get a simple measure, order quantity. So there I've got the table. Now, these values aren't really helpful unless you've got all the product IDs memorized, which is good for you if you do, but it's not really an efficient use of time. So what we've done is allowed you to create your own custom hierarchy. And here I've already kind of pre-created one. Let's dive in and actually go through the creation process. So let's go to New Hierarchy. Let's grab the product ID from the table of products. So there it is. I'm just going to drag product ID onto the screen, wherever it is. There it is. And Dundas BI is automatically going to pick up the hierarchical structure. So what's interesting is that it actually goes across multiple tables. The product ID is a primary key in this table, but it's a foreign key inside of the category table. It's also a foreign key inside of the subcategory table, which is right here. So it scanned the actual available systems looking for existing structures and just built the hierarchy for you. This is obviously incredibly handy, and just to see kind of what that looks like, you can actually modify things after the fact. So maybe your data is not structured as well as you want, and you need to modify the the custom hierarchy after you've allowed the system to kind of scan it for what it thinks the hierarchy should be. You can definitely do that. You can change the source, you can add composite keys, you can change the level name, etc. Lots of options. You could even add additional levels if you wanted to. But that's it. Once that's done, let's go back to the dashboard. You'll have your hierarchy. And let's open up the data binding panel again. So there's product ID again, not very helpful. So let's grab that hierarchy that I built. Let's on category here. Oh, actually, sorry, you have to drag the whole hierarchy. There we go. So it automatically picked up the relationship between the data powering the hierarchy and the data that's on this visualization, and just connected made the join behind the scenes. Very, very helpful for a power user who just wants to kind of discover data and clean it up and make it presentable, or at least understandable. And now you can manipulate the data however you want. So if you wanted to revisualize it, do a bar chart, again, there's our kind of handy bar chart that we were reviewing before, and then you can continue to kind of manipulate it. I'm going to leave this open because I think we're actually going to use this for the next section, which is configurations and properties. So here we're going to be looking at different color rule options. So actually I don't need that. I've got a setup table here. So this is obviously a little boring. Maybe you want to add some color to the actual bars themselves. So there's a number of ways that you can do that. Let's actually jump into edit mode. And let's open up the data binding panel. So here are the measures and dimensions that are available within this set of data. But there's this button over here called bindings. This actually gives you all of the ways in which you can bind visual elements to data. You can see here there's a series color option. But what's interesting is, let's just say that I have the data binding panel open here. If I open up the properties and I go to the look, you can see here that bind data to color is an option under color rules, but there's no real other option here. So let's click that, and it actually automatically opens up the binding section of the data binding panel. And if you hover over the actual link, it tells you, go to the colors-based values in the binding section of the data binding panel. So essentially what you're going to do, if you want the color to be based on the actual value itself, or maybe some other value, you can drag this onto here, and now it's based on the order quantity value. You could have it as a different value, so maybe you want the bar height to be based on order quantity and the color to be based on line total. So that's how that would work. You see here the auto color rule gets generated in the properties panel. You could even open this up and modify it if you wanted to, change the colors, make it transparent, etc. You could even change the number of classes. So let's drill down here, switch to view, and just change the level to subcategory so that we see a little bit more variety. Zoom out here. All right, so now we've got a few more things, but there's only 4 different colors here. So maybe if I wanted to, let's go back to the color rule. Instead of having 4, maybe let's have 10. It's a subtle change, but it does give a little bit more kind of a more accurate depiction of the values. Or if you wanted to select like hard-coded from or to values, you can. If you wanted to change the distribution from equally across 10 different colors to continuously, basically like modifying the shades themselves, it's another way that you can do it. So lots of options there. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this and show you another way that you can color a visualization. Let's go back to the bindings and let's get rid of that. Here I'm actually going to drag the product. But what I need to do is I need to grab the hierarchy value. Let's grab category and just drag it on here. Perfect. So what I've done is I've actually attached categorical data to the color. Now that doesn't really do much. Obviously it didn't change anything here, but what it did do is it allowed me to add my own discrete color rules. So if I wanted to, specify, let's see, road bikes. So this really tall bar has some particular color. Let's do something ridiculous like aqua. I would select road bikes and sorry, that's my fault. Drag subcategory onto here. And okay, well, I'm going above and beyond here. Let's change the level back to category, simplify it a bit. And let's delete this one. So you would add a discrete color rule and specify, bikes. And there you go. Flags itself as black, and then you can change the color to whatever you like. I've actually got a metric set that's kind of pre-done for us. So let's drag that on just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So there you go. That's something that you could do, and this also applies to multiple levels down. So if I open up the properties, you can see I've set these discrete color rules here already, and when I expand out bikes, the color persists across multiple levels. This really helps when you have something like a legend. So if I wanted to add a legend control here, just drag that across, switch to view. So now you can see just by the colors, even though maybe you've drilled down into bikes and it's showing different labels, you still know that it's a type of bike based on the color and the legend. So actually there's a question in from Joshua. So what about navigation back up after a single click drill down? So, and I've had this question before. You would actually have to script that simply because there's a number of ways in which you can drill down. You can change the level like multiple ways. You could filter in different ways. So what you would have to do is there's actually a really simple script which utilizes the actual browser window back functionality. So let me jump back to that sample. Oh, that's not the one. There we go. So if I click and drill down, what's interesting is if you hit the back button, it'll actually drill back up again. So that's essentially the easiest and best way to allow you to reverse the action that you just did. Okay, let's move on. All right, so we just covered different color rules. Now let's go over the ability to revisualize individual columns in a table. And I'm actually going to jump to a specific sample that we already have created. Basically, just a very large table with a number of columns. Now, these values, they look great, but they're not really super informative as just text. So what you can do is you can actually right-click on an individual column in a table, and you have this option to revisualize. And there's a number of additional options that get populated in this list. I mean, if I wanted to revisualize the whole table to a bar chart or whatever, I could, but here I've actually got the option to specify the actual column itself. So what I've done is I've revisualized it to a data bar. Now this tells a completely different story as a result. I mean, from a text perspective, you can see that 80,000, 80,000, 10,000, etc. It's not obvious the difference in size, in volume, in total spend. But when you revisualize the column to something like this, it's much more visually apparent. And if you wanted to also include the text, there is a property to allow you to re-add the text to the column itself. It basically hovers, it sits over top of the data bar. All right. This is another way to revisualize columns. So what I've done is I've taken a sample table, similar to the one that we had before, but I've actually told this city column to be a hyperlink column instead of just a regular text column. And the hyperlink URL is dynamic, so it's based on the value that's in here. I'm basically just traveling to Wikipedia, and when I click on, say, Blackfalds, Alberta, it's just a city, it's going to take me to Blackfalds Wikipedia page. And to show you how to do that, let's just jump into edit mode here. Let's jump into the properties. So here I've actually highlighted the column that I want to modify, and I've gone into the properties. Now you don't have to highlight it and go to properties. You could actually select it from within here. But the idea here is that what I've done is I've placed square brackets around the dynamic value that I want to change as a result. So when I click on this cell, it's going to use this address plus whatever value is in the city column. And you can put any column, actually. Even if I'm clicking on the city column, it doesn't have to be the dynamic city cell that gets populated in here. If I wanted the latitude and longitude to also get populated, I can do that as well. And I've got a sample for that. So instead of using the actual column itself as hyperlinks, you could actually set up a navigation interaction. So here I've just got like another regular table, but instead of clicking on Blackfalds and going to the Wikipedia page, I decided to utilize the latitude and longitude plotting to show it on a map. So here you can see that the latitude and longitude values got pushed into the Google Maps URL, and now I'm traveling to Blackfalds. If you zoom out, you can see that I'm actually in Alberta once Google decides to load the map. Here we go. So there's lots of ways that you can do that, and let me show you what that looks like. So similar to what I did before, I went into the click interaction and added a navigate. And here, I've taken the Google Maps URL with the query string, and I've got lat and long in these placeholder tags. And these placeholder tags can be anything, because actually what I've done is I've specified in the parameters, like, hey, latitude is like the value latitude in the row that I'm clicking on is going to get passed into this placeholder. So it's matching basically the text step. So the text could be anything. But you can see here that I could send whatever value I wanted to. And the crazy thing is about everything that I've shown you is that none of this has required any scripting, with the exception of that kind of expansive pie chart. But even that was like 2 lines of script. So you can see that the possibilities are quite endless as far as creating a really cool experience for your users. So let's jump into multiple axes. This one isn't super obvious, but it's actually quite easy to set up. So here I've actually got 2 vertical axes. This right axis is actually a representative of the line chart here, and the left is representative of the bar. Let's actually go through the process of building this. I'm going to hide these, and I'm going to jump into edit mode. Let's hide that layer. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to just quickly grab order quantity and our helpful product table. Let's revisualize this to a bar chart. So something where you would want this to happen, maybe let's switch to view so that we can actually sort this and play with it a bit. So we'll sort this descending. Say you create a formula visualization, or add a formula to the visualization using the data tools option. So here I'm adding a formula. Let's add something useful. Maybe export this as a line, And let's do something like, cumulative total. Actually, sorry, let's do percent total of the order quantity value. Let's divide that by the sum that should work. Let's apply that. And let's close. So you can see the line actually got generated, but it's way at the bottom because it doesn't scale well with the left axis. So let's go back and edit. And let's go to the properties. So there's the series 2 that I created. You can click on that. You can actually define which axes it uses. If you wanted to create a new horizontal axis, you could. If you wanted to create a new vertical, you could. So let's do that. Let's create a new right axis. And that's it. So now it's actually scaling with the correct axes, and actually looks like my formula is a little screwy, but that's okay. All right. Now another thing that a lot of people really like is to flag data so that it's easier to see when it's met some sort of condition or crossed some particular threshold. So here we're actually doing that. And this is actually one of the sample dashboards that we created just to showcase some of the cool features in the product. So you'll see some familiar things such as the data bar and the text on top, the ability to click on a particular bar and have that affect other visualizations. So there's lots of ways in which you can do this, different filter controls. So a lot of options here, but the thing that I want to point out is that we've actually implemented states here to flag these particular data points as different from the others. So we have this target and the values have crossed it, and so they're getting colored differently. And let me actually jump over to a visualization here. Let me just use the color rules one. When I set up a state on a visualization, I'm going to base it on the quantity. I'll just say quantity states. We're going to add something like above average, add a condition that basically says, greater than, and then, enter in whatever you want. So you can base it on the product itself, you can base it on the like some sort of constant. What I should have done is actually created an average formula prior to, and then it would populate in this area, but just for simplicity's sake, let's just enter in a constant value. I don't know, something like 70,000 or something. Let's preview that. Perfect. So now you can actually change the, let's get rid of the color rules first. There we go. It's not messing it up. So you can see here that everything above average is being flagged as red, but red's not really positive. So let's go to the series, let's go to the look, and there's that state style. You can open this and modify this however you want. Maybe you don't want to color it red. Maybe you don't want to color it at all. Maybe you just want to subtly make it stand out by adding a stroke. So here let's add like a black kind of, actually that's not really super visible. Let's do something a little bit more obvious like aqua. There you go. You could add the width, maybe make it a little bit thicker, change the dash type. I mean, I wouldn't call that subtle, but my point is that you can do a lot with the actual state style itself. You can even, instead of changing the bar, you could even maybe show markers. So a marker could be anything. Let's get rid of the stroke here. The marker themselves is right there. Let's actually make this fill. Oop. My password manager is yelling at me. Perfect. And let's make the marker fill black. There you go. So instead of, showing the actual bar, maybe you're flagging a marker. The marker shape could be whatever you want. Maybe you want it to be a check mark or something like that. It's not very big. Let's make that bigger. Yeah. So the options are pretty endless as far as what you can do within the properties of states as well. All right. Let's move on to the data prep layer. Getting pretty close to the end of time. Now we've still got about 10-15 minutes. So our data prep layer sits on top of either your existing ETL layer or your data warehouse or whatever. And the value of it is the fact that it doesn't need to, Dundas BI doesn't require you to change your underlying data structure for you to be able to effectively report on your data, because we have our own data preparation layer, which we call data cubes. So let's travel into one right now. I just created kind of a sample one, gives you an example of what some of the things that you can do. So I'm here, I'm actually grabbing 3 different tables from my handy AdventureWorks data connector. Now these can actually come from different data connectors as well. So if you wanted to use this this Excel spreadsheet that I have here, drag that on and join it up, you can. It doesn't care where the data is coming from. It's going to kind of treat it as a generic. But along the way, what I've done is I've actually selected the bridges here, and I've inserted different transformations. And there's lots of options here. And in this particular case, some of the things that we've done here using a calculated element, they're not available to be, calculated element allows you to utilize the .NET platform, because this is all being calculated within, within the Dundas BI server using C#. So you can actually write C# to, generate new columns. So that's what we've done. I've created 2 new columns. Let's open this up and show you. I've created a weekday column. Edit that. So I'm just simply returning the order date as a string with a specific format style. And that's it. And here, I'm doing something a little bit more complex. I'm creating a full name. So some of the columns within this table are, title, first name, last name, suffix, middle name, etc. I wanted to actually combine them all into just a full name. So that's what I've done. I've just created a string and checked to see if the columns are empty before I, concatenated the values. But essentially what I'm returning with is just a full name. If you ever wanted to, explore the data along the path, you can open up the data preview, select salesperson. There's the columns that I've made available. Here's the person table. Here's what it looks like after the join, and here's what it looks like after the calculated element. So there's the full name. I've specified not to carry along, carry past the calculated element, the title, last name, middle name, etc., because I'm combining them all into one particular column. But you can see that's much easier to read. And I didn't need to change any of the underlying structure to do it. I'm also just doing a simple string trimming just in case there were some weird cases where one particular name had a trailing or leading space. Just utilizing the string transformation to trim the full name. And that's it. Now you can see what it looks like after the join. You've got your full name, you've got your dates, you've got your sales quota, and then you've got your processed result. I'm going to leave this open. So defining descriptions for measures and dimensions, this is actually applicable to what we were just looking at. When you actually have your processed result, you can modify, say, something like full name and modify the actual description. So here I'm saying, I've combined several columns to create a single name column. Hi Mom, waves. That's just me letting you know that this isn't something that is being pulled from the database. I'm adding something ridiculous to let you know that I've added it here. And now when I actually open up the data cube and hover over the full name column, so here's the data cube, and if I hover over the full name column, you'll see that that description populates itself inside the tooltip. This really helps for people trying to determine, what data, what the data that they're looking at is, and how it relates to, other tables and whether or not it's a foreign key or a primary key and that sort of thing. So you can add, lots of information to kind of guide the user to better understand what they're looking at. Perfect. And here, this is something that we added recently. And to answer, sorry if I'm pronouncing, I'm terrible with names. I'm a math person, so words and names don't really work with me. But Sudan, I'm assuming, is how you pronounce that. Calculating the columns from SQL, or should we calculate the columns in Dundas? Which one is faster? I would say the golden rule is, if SQL is meant to do it, if it does it well, then you should probably do it within SQL, either through our interface or through a manual query or behind the scenes before you even bring it into Dundas BI. But if it's something that SQL can't do and .NET can, then obviously the answer is to utilize our transformation node. Or if it's something that SQL is known to not handle it very well and .NET is known to handle it better, then there's your answer. It's kind of it's not really a a black and white answer, but I guess it depends on what you're going to be calculating. So searchable tags. This is something that we added recently. It allows you to open up the properties of a particular value, such as the webinar cube that we've been building here, and add tags to be able to search for them. So, for example, this is the webinar cube. Maybe I just want to give it something like, something ridiculous like tag your it. It's terrible. It's a horrible joke. I'm so sorry. But now that that's there, you can actually confirm that. And in the search functionality within Dundas BI, I'm just going to close this down. You can type in tag your it, and the webinar cube pops up. So this is, again, really, really helpful for allowing your users to quickly search for things based on relationships. And if I wanted to put this tag into multiple items, not just cubes, I could put them in data connectors or styles or dashboards or whatever I like. Those would all get populated here as a result of that. Cool. I'm going to leave this open just because there's something cool that I wanted to show you in the scripting section, and I think we have time. I would say there's about 5 minutes left. So let me jump over just because I wanted to leave some time for answering questions and that sort of thing. Let's jump into the scripting and the API. If you see, and by the way, for those who have kind of joined late, if you see anything that you're interested in and you didn't quite catch how it was done, if I showed how it was done, you can always get the recording, because we are recording this, or you can just contact support. We would be happy to give you a little quick tutorial on how to do something particular. So I already showed you the expand and drill down scripting option, so we'll skip that one. Here, what I've actually done is I've just used a simple kind of JavaScript and jQuery script to modify the actual tile control. So this is a tile navigation control that we have built into Dundas BI. This is kind of the default look. Right now I've set it to only show me one particular folder of dashboards. This is our sample list of sample dashboards. Now, looking at this, you're like, that's a lot of blue and it's not really super descriptive. Visually, I can't really tell what I'm clicking on very quickly. So what I did is I actually utilized our API to swap out the icon for thumbnails. And these thumbnails are generated using our API. So much more informative. You can easily see, oh, right, it's the table with all the colors. So much easier to kind of pinpoint what you actually wanted to travel to. So that's one example. Advanced formulas. Not a lot of people know about this. you can actually use conditional statements on the visualization of in the formula visualizations. So let's open up the data mining panel. So this, unit price average expression, which I'm showing here, is a formula. So let's open up the formula itself. I've actually used a conditional statement here. I'm saying, if the unit price is greater than the average, then just return the unit price. But if it's not, then make it negative. This is kind of a terrible example, but the idea here is that maybe the person who's designing this wants to make sure that everyone who every item or category that's below average, they want to make it really, really apparent by completely shifting it in the opposite direction. So, just something funny. Obviously, this doesn't follow best practices, but just a kind of a simple example to show you what's possible. I believe formulas can be nested, yes. So actually in that example, sorry Kevin, this is a question from Kevin, can formulas be nested? In that example, I actually utilized the average formula inside of the conditional brackets of the if statement. So yes, you can do things like that. All right, and let's jump over to this one. So the application itself, can be white labeled and can be used however you want. I'm going to exit full screen here so that you can actually see this. When I open up the navigation panel here, this is just our default kind of layout. But just to give you an example of something that you can do, you can actually modify our existing structure. So here I'm going to click this button, and now when I open up this panel, I get this additional drop-down that allows me to travel to different dashboards. So this is actually like modifying the system itself. Because we give you Dundas BI, you can do cool things like this. And just like the functionality here can be altered, you can also change the color, and you can also change the icons. You can do whatever you want with it. So just something pretty nifty to give you some ideas. Does anybody say nifty anymore? Am I the only person? I think I'm probably the only person. Thank you, Scott. It's you and me against the world. All right, so utilizing JavaScript to embed another visualization. We do have maps within Dundas BI, but I mean, Google and Bing Maps do a really good job of their maps, and sometimes you want to see like really, really granular views. So what we've done here is we've actually got data inside of Dundas BI that we're passing into the Bing API to generate this map. So all of these points are latitude and longitude points coming from Dundas BI. And you can even do cool things like, make drawings on the actual map itself. This is just, another way that you could even leverage other tools within Dundas BI to enhance the user's experience even further. And to answer Goran, yes, the videos are available to download. We just, once it's done recording and that sort of thing, we'll make it available. Probably send out an email link. And so actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump back to this data cube. So I did create this, I was up until like 2 o'clock last night just playing with the API because that's what I like to do in my free time. But I'm actually going to copy and paste something that I built last night into just the designer here. So this is our cube. I'm going to open up the console, the developer console within Chrome. And I'm just going to paste this script. You don't really need to know exactly what's happening, but pay attention to the toolbar up at the top here once I confirm this. So this script is actually injecting my own custom command directly into the toolbar. And you can fire this script off, in a ready event or something like that. You don't have to do it like the way that I did it here by pasting it into the console window. But my point is that this button now carries along with it its own kind of functionality. So, something that is really, really handy is tags. So the properties, there's my your tag, your it tag. Let's just get rid of that. Maybe I don't want maybe I want all of the columns that are available within this data cube to be tags so that I can search for them. And if you apply this to all of your data connectors and your data cubes, this would allow people to very easily search for columns. And again, this is actually a really handy feature, and we're likely going to incorporate it into the product, later, in a later version. But currently, because our platform is so flexible, you can just build this functionality in yourself. So here I'm just going to click this button. The tags have been applied. Fantastic. So we've got bonus, commission percent, sales quota, total due, etc. If I go back to the properties, you can see that all of those are now here. So now if I'm searching for something, I can search for total due. And there it shows up. I've already applied it to sales cube as well, so that's why both of them are showing up. And finally, I think I've got a little bit of time. Bulk dashboard export. This is actually something that one of our clients, gave us this idea to just present somebody with, some sort of control that says you can export multiple dashboards if you wanted to. So here I can, select 2 and just hit export now, and it's going to start the process of exporting those for me, and they're going to actually pop up automatically within Chrome once they're done. But yeah, just another kind of really cool example of ways in which you can modify the system to suit your business use case. So there's the first dashboard. It got finished. One of the properties within our export API is to actually set the landscape or portrait. It looks like we actually had it set to portrait, but that's okay. You can just change that value. I think it's like a Boolean value or something like that. But yeah, and this one's should be finishing up very soon as well. I think we're going to jump into questions, though. There's that second dashboard. Perfect. All right, so that just gives you an idea. But that's it. Short and sweet. Lots of information. Sorry, I kind of crammed it all in as quickly as I could. I would love to do how-tos for all of these, but again, time was permitting. But that doesn't mean that we, don't have that information for you. So if you saw anything that you liked on here, just give support and shoot support an email at support@dundas.com. They'd be more than happy to accommodate you with some sort of either video or tutorial or even a link. Maybe we have a link on our support site that showcases the functionality that we're displaying. But let's go to questions. Try and read them out as well as I can. Okay, so I'll go by time here. Okay, so we've got Sergio. Looks like you asked a couple. Let me see if I can answer the first one. Is there a way to set a color rule to set of data so whenever a chart is created, the items always have the same color? Whenever a chart is created, the items always have the same color. So absolutely. So I think what you're referring to is automatic color rules. And I believe I had a sample for that. So let me see if I can find it here. Oop, that's survey, not sample. There we go. Yep. Automatic color rules. Perfect. Okay. So I think what you're asking is, whether or not the you load up a dashboard and colors are automatically applied. So what I've done is I've created a script here that says North America is associated to this particular color hex code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you'd have this kind of object somewhere. It's called member colors, and then I'm looping through all of the charts that are on the dashboard and basically saying color the data points based on the member colors that I've defined. So if I apply that script, you see there that all of the charts, regardless of what chart type they are, get that color that's associated to them, even the legend control. So yes, that's absolutely possible. Okay, we've got Sammer. Is the dynamic hierarchy different from the one that you created? I'm trying to remember what I was doing at that time during the dynamic hierarchy. I might have to get back to you on that, and or since we're going to be, emailing out the video, if you are still confused, maybe just find the actual time in which I'm displaying what you're referring to in the video, and then email support saying here at this time on this webinar video he goes through this. I was curious about dynamic hierarchies, etc., etc. So Joshua, how is data pulled directly from the primary application stat server, i.e. X, Aspect, Genesis, etc., converted and visualized in Dundas? Okay, so this is a pretty general question about how we pull data. So the data providers that we actually connect to, and what I'll do is I'll create a new data connector, are here. So we can connect to, Access, Redshift, Excel, other different flat files, OData, ODBC drivers, your stereotypical relational databases and OLAP cubes, and Teradata, etc. These are the ones that we provide to you out of the box. However, if you wanted to build your own custom data provider using our API, and we do have samples on how to do that for things like unstructured data, maybe something like Twitter data or something like that, social media data, or just a different data provider that we haven't built into the product out of the box due to either maybe it's your own proprietary data provider, or maybe it's a less common one. You can build your own, or you could find an ODBC driver. But essentially, that's how we're doing it. We're actually connecting to it directly in real time, and we're just saving the credentials necessary to gather that data into what we call a Dundas data connector. And then the data connector feeds into either a cube or directly to a dashboard, etc., etc. So. If that answer is not, doesn't kind of explain the process clear enough, we can always set up a call, or I can have support kind of, give you a more detailed or in-depth explanation over email. Okay, let's go to Thomas. Does Dundas BI support analysis services? Yes, it does. So we do connect to OLAP. Tabular as a data source too. Yep. Okay. And let's see here. Are these samples available to download, or can we get them from the support? Yeah, Joshua. Essentially, a lot of these actually I created just to show off some of the cool things that I knew Dundas BI could do. However, my intention is to hopefully have all of these samples created as support articles so that they are available on the support site. We're also looking to expand our library of tutorial videos and that sort of thing, even throw up some kind of, casual YouTube videos explaining some cool, funky features and that sort of thing. So we are looking into those, and you will likely see some of these, or maybe even all of these samples that I've shown you today, pop up there, and yeah. Okay, so for a question from Habiba, is there a way to create a script library for commonly used scripts and just include them in dashboards rather than having to copy and paste useful? Okay, absolutely. One of the things that we do within the folder structure of Dundas BI, and I would have to remote into our server, and I'm kind of in a broadcast computer booth right now, so I can't do it. But essentially, there is a file called the javascript.override.js file. And just like the JavaScript one, we also have a CSS one and the HTML one. Those files will get loaded into every single view of Dundas BI. So if you wanted to build a library of helper functions, like you're saying, so that you could use reuse code, that's a really good place to put it. Another really good place would be, if the functions that you're creating are only really specific to that one dashboard, you could always just put it in the ready or the loading function of the dashboard. So here, let's go to properties. The loading event, you could add your own script. And that's really handy, because if you say move this dashboard from a development environment to a production environment, this script is actually attached as metadata to the dashboard itself, so it will transfer over. Whereas things that you leave in the JavaScript override file, because it's part of the actual like website file structure, you would have to manually do that and make sure that those two files are synchronized across both your development environment and your server production environment. So that's a good place to put it. Essentially, what you would do is you would just create an object attached to the window, and inside that object, you could basically say, function this does that, etc. Actually, I think we have a support article on that exact topic. Let me just find modify. I can't spell today. Yep. So here, let me see if I can copy and paste this into the answer for you. Perfect. So this article actually shows you kind of where to go and what types of things that you can do. Oh, actually the wrong article. This is actually about modifying view parameters directly on the. So there is an staying organized while developing scripts. There we go. This is the one that I wanted. Let's fix that. There we go. So this basically tells you, the setup and what I've done here. So I'm creating an object called my library attached to the window, and I'm, writing functions, attaching them to the library itself, and then storing them inside the override file. So this is an article kind of letting you know how to set that process up. Hopefully that answers your question. We're a little bit over time. Let's see if I can answer some quick questions here. From Louis Silva, can we have the dashboards examples that we have been used in the webinar? Yes, absolutely. We're going to be showcasing that, or just contact support and they'll be able to write up a quick tutorial for you. Omar, is it possible to personalize access for user and roles for report in Dundas? Absolutely, Omar. What you're looking for is custom attributes. Those attributes can be attached to individual accounts. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, let me jump over to our security sample here. It's like role-level security, essentially. So the custom attribute that you're going to be creating as an administrator of Dundas BI, you would basically attach it to a person and then give it a value for that person. That essentially acts as a where clause inside the query that's being generated and sent to the source data. So the data that's returned is specific to that user. So simulation would look like this. So you have one dashboard, user with the custom attribute value of Africa for country, for the country column or something like that, is currently logged in. But if somebody else logged in and they had the value of Europe, it's the exact same dashboard, but you're getting a completely different data set. I hope that answers your question. And okay, final question from, let's see here. Joshua, I believe, is waiting patiently for this one. Have you all considered creating a Dundas BI forum on your website for existing customers to post questions, etc.? Yes, that is definitely something that we have talked about. The biggest kind of roadblock that we're facing regarding a forum is that forums do require pretty diligent moderation, and currently we're actually hiring quite a few people to expand our team here at Dundas because things are really starting to ramp up. And until we have enough bodies to allow us to create a moderator role, we just don't have the manpower to essentially monitor that. It is something that we are talking about, though, and you're right. It would be incredibly handy for people to for a community to just basically, answer questions for each other. But again, we don't necessarily want somebody from 3 versions ago answering a question using a really complex script when it's already built into, a newer version that the user asking the question is currently using. So, okay. So there are a couple questions that I did not get to, unfortunately. I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar. Again, if you have any additional questions, or just if you wanted to, talk and we can, discuss my my Star Wars slippers and the fact that I say nifty, you can always give me a call. But that's pretty much it. I hope everyone